Hi everybody, nice to meet you all. Anyone watching, welcome to the On Point panel discussion. This chat is going to be about touring gigs and DIY shows. My name's Sarah Wilson, I'm from Tracks. We're an organisation based in Darlington. We put gigs and festivals and workshops and things like that on. I'm really excited to welcome our panel today. Thanks so much for being involved. We've got Matt Hanna from Runway Artists. Hi Matt. So Runway Artists is an independent booking agency looking after artists such as Catelyn Kane, Liz Lawrence, Tom Joshua and Jodie Nicholson, amongst many others. We're also joined by Sue Collier from Ionic Events. So that's an events company. They run Durham Brass Festival, Lamplight Festival, Mouth of the Tyne Festival, in amongst many other wonderful things. And Sue, you're also a promoters rep for SJM. And you've got over 25 years working in the touring and live music industry, so lots of amazing experience there. And then we're also joined by Jayne Dent, aka Me Lost Me. So this Me Lost Me is the project of Newcastle-based electronic folk innovator Jayne Dent, who is the recent recipient of the Paul Hamlyn Foundation Award for Composers and also Artist in Residence at the Sage Gateshead. So we've got some fantastic knowledge in the room. Thank you everybody for joining us today.
Thanks, Sarah.
Shall we just get right on in, because we've got loads to cover and we've got about 45 minutes I think. So okay, so if that's all right with you guys, we'll go straight into the questions. Jayne, I thought we'd start with you from a musician's point of view. What would you say are sort of the best practices for getting a gig in the first place? How do you get a gig? And are there any sort of common mistakes that you might have made in the past that you've learned from, or that you see other artists do?
To begin with, I would say like the main thing is being nice to people. Like that's like the number one, being really nice and chatting to people, kind of putting yourself out there, like going to gigs, seeing the venues, meeting the promoters, appreciating the scene like locally, is like a really important thing. And like, I know it could be hard if you're a bit like shy or whatever, but it really does make a difference to kind of have your face sort of there locally. And then like outside of your scene, the best way I found to get gigs sort of around the country, because I've put together a few DIY tours and stuff, is to like meet musicians locally that are touring and like make friends with them, chat to them, and then they might be like, oh, you should come and play in Liverpool, or you should and then then you get this sort of like rapport with people. So yeah, I think that's like would be like my total starting point for sure. I think one mistake I've made a lot is not asking about fees straight away, and then like you get to the gig and you're like, we didn't even talk about if I'm gonna get paid, and then they give you like a crate of beers and you're like, okay. So I think that's something I'm trying to get more in the habit of, and that I would encourage anyone who's starting out gigging, or has like been doing it for a bit, is to like talk about things like food and your tech requirements and like transport and accommodation if it's like, and also payment. Don't make that mistake.
Sure. Well, I mean, you can't put you can't fill your petrol tank with a load of beer, can you, really?
Nope.
Unfortunately. Okay. Is there anything you guys might like to add to that, Matt or Sue?
I think
any like common mistakes that you might see artists who are trying to get gigs?
Yeah, I think to kind of just to kind of wrap up kind of roughly what Jayne was saying, like I think a lot of it is relationship based, and my advice to new artists when they're asking about getting on good bills, be it locally or on tours or things like that, I think it's important to cultivate a bit of a relationship with venue bookers, with the local promoters that are booking the same bands that you want to be on bills with and things like that. And that's building that relationship means that not every interaction is you selling your band. If you only ever get in touch because you're like, I need a gig this week, what have you got? Like, what you want to be the person they pick up the phone to and call when the right thing comes along. So I think presenting yourself in a way where it's a case of I'm waiting for the right thing. There's a bit of other stuff going on, presenting the fact that you've got maybe a couple of releases going on, you've got some local press. Ultimately a lot of the time, if you're going to be a local support, it's just about understanding what the promoter wants from you. It's about knowing that you're going to add. It's not even necessarily about selling tickets. Sometimes it's about just adding to the local profile of the show, so they want to know that you haven't got 16 other shows in the region next month. They want to know that you've got a bit of a local network, that you're pushing something, and that you're going to be talking about the gig. And obviously then if that leads to selling some tickets, you bring some guests and the room looks great, then that's kind of ticking all the boxes. But just kind of cultivating those relationships. So I think maybe the thing that you see that people do wrong from my side is that everything's kind of a sell, instead of cultivating those relationships and just being able to have normal. So much of, as an agent, so much of what we do is just little conversations here and there. You're not necessarily talking about the bands you're working with, but you're building up a rapport with a booker or a promoter, so that when you've then got artists to talk about, it's a very easy conversation because you've already talked about the football, the weather, the whatever, and just then talking about, hey, I've got this band, have you got any supports coming up, is a very easy conversation, rather than you having to do all of that at once because you need a gig next week.
Yeah. And anything you would like to add to that, Sue? Oh.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Just going on from what Matt and Jayne have both said there, really. I think Jayne's first point about, be nice, that goes a long way with a promoter. It really does. Mm-hmm. Find out the name of who you're getting in contact with as well. I would say to any artist, you really know who you're emailing. Get the name of the venue right, get the name of the festival right, get the name of the person right. I used to work with a guy years ago who constantly got called the wrong name, and it would drive him insane. That someone just hadn't done their homework. And also when you're getting in touch with people, I know, I would say always try and find that sweet spot when you're going to email someone if it's something important. You don't want to be emailing on a Friday afternoon. No one's going to look at that email. And Matt's laughing there, I can see, yeah. It's just no one in the music industry is looking at that point, really, or paying attention. You want to try and email kind of before lunch, about kind of 10:30, 11 o'clock, to get people's best attention, or that nice spot between 3 and 4. And be professional, mm-hmm. Be as professional as you can be. Have a rider, have that ability to discuss fees and money. Like I think both Jayne and Matt had said, know your worth and your value too, and be nice. Just connect.
Yeah, I think what Jayne sort of said at the beginning, I think that whole idea about a band just constantly bothering you, going, I want a gig, but they never ever come to any gigs or events that you put on, or you never see them in any kind of, So, I know from sort of Track's point of view, we really like it when you see other bands at other bands' gigs, or wearing a band t-shirt of another local band on their show, and it has that nice community vibe, doesn't it? Yeah,
it just really supports that scene, and that's really what you want to see.
Definitely. So I think I'll come to I'll stay with you for this one, Sue. When would you say an artist is ready for their own headline show?
Well, it really depends what you're classing as a headline show. I mean, I would say in every kind of city, your first headline show is probably in whatever your local venue is that's around 150 capacity. So, when you're able to sell 100 to 150 tickets on that strength, on your own merit, then that's when you're kind of ready for it. Really, you need a following. You really do.
And Matt, would you say is an artist's profile more important than their music? Would you say when it comes to like selling a show, selling a tour?
Yeah, I mean, It's an interesting question. I think the two obviously interact in such a unique way that you can't really, well, you like to think at least that you can't have one without the other. I mean, we can all think of music that we think is absolute dross, but for some reason has a following of millions. So maybe it's not so important. But I think you've got to go into the process if that's your aim. If it's anything other than just a bit of fun, if the aim is to get to that first headline show, then you've got to be going about it in a way that means you're going to be continually getting better musically. Like ultimately, you know, the number of artists that you talk to where, you know, what do I need to do to get from A to B? Well, you know, the honest answer for a lot of the time is you need to go away, you need to develop the music a bit more, the music needs to improve, because ultimately that's what's going to pick you up fans. But if at the same time you're not present on social media, you're not doing things like Sue said, how great is it to be in a scene where you've got people supporting other artists and things like that? Are you giving people the opportunity to do that? Do you have t-shirts? Do you have totes? Do you have badges? Are you doing that sort of thing where you can join and you can be part of that scene? You allowing yourself and your artists to get kind of ingratiated with the local community. So obviously when it then comes to selling, you know, we have this big, almost a misnomer in that we have promoters who everyone will say, well, it's their job to promote the gig. But, you know, I view everything as a co-promotion at the very least between the nominated promoter and the band. You know, it's equally their responsibility to bring people to the show as it is the promoters. And so you've got to put yourself in a position where you're going to be able to connect with people that like your music. You're going to be able to say, here's a link to a ticket link for a gig, buy a ticket, come along, here are the details. If you haven't put yourself in that position where you can do that, then you're going to get, you know, as good as your music is, the venue put you on, nobody turns up, where do you go from there? Back to the drawing board, back to new music, I guess. So yeah, I think you've got to be looking at both in tandem for sure.
I think it's about being creative in both areas, really, isn't it? You know, obviously from a promoter's point of view, your music's got to be amazing. You know, it's got to be, that's where the main focus has got to be, because like Matt says, if your profile is amazing but what you're offering isn't, then that's not really going to go very far. But I think it's, you know, for an artist to try to be creative in that profile building is really, really important. Or if they can't themselves, if they are uncomfortable with that, to have friends who do that for them. You know, I mean, some of the best examples of that are huge missions like Arctic Monkeys when they broke through. You know, they're kind of mates and friends who got on that scene and helped create that initial, you know, first proper use of a band breaking through kind of social media as well. It's, you know, that's important. The music was certainly there as well with the likes of them, but their whole presence and profile was as creative as the music at that time. Yeah.
So Jayne, from a musician's point of view, do you find sort of, I don't know, maintaining your profile as an artist, do you feel it's as important as your music? Does it take up the same amount of time as creating music? Because I know it can be like quite a drain, can't it? Like, oh, I've got to do my socials or I've got to create content, but you'd rather be writing a song.
I think I'm actually like trying really hard to spend more time making music, because I think it can get kind of quite overwhelming, especially when you get into this this like mindset where you're like, oh, but this is how I make money, so I need to like sell stuff, and then you really like neglect the music. And it's hard to, like, you've got to keep that balance of keeping up with the social stuff and keeping your fans and people sort of engaged and interested, and also like letting yourself have time to like play musically and like experiment and have fun with it and develop what you're doing. I've definitely been like got too far into the sort of doing a PR campaign, and then I'm like, I haven't sang in a month or whatever, and you're like, why am I doing that to myself? So I think it is like it's definitely like a balancing act for sure. I would also say like scheduling your social media posts, do it sooner than I did. It's like just like having like, okay, Monday morning, I'm just going to sit and schedule my posts for a week. I've got like I'm going to share a picture of a live image. I'm going to share a bit of merch. I'm going to promote a show later on or whatever. And doing that all in the first hour of the week, and then just not having to do that is really nice.
That's a really good tip. So what platform do you use for that, just for anybody watching, so they can get an idea of what they could use to do that?
I just use the Facebook Business Suite because it does Facebook and Instagram. I know there are ones that do all of them.
There's a few out there, isn't there? There's a Hootsuite, and I think there's a few
different ones.
So that feels like a little bit less pressure on you to get it over and done with on the Monday.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
Then I suppose you're still having to check in throughout the week to have that two-way conversation with fans at times and stuff.
Of course, yeah. And like if you've got a show, you might schedule a post about it like on the Monday, but then, you get to the venue and you're like, oh, I've arrived at the venue, looking forward to tonight or whatever. Like you can still do those like live bits that are a bit more like they're sort of the less formal sort of stuff. I still would do like as and when, because it feels more like I'm sharing the experience with them. And like I prefer that kind of like interaction anyway. So that's like a chore.
I think those are some great tips there, and I think there's such a cross section of artists. Some artists, as you say, are really good at that stuff as well as the music. It can be it's kind of like a necessary evil, isn't it? Like that bit has to be done to make the other bit work, but as you say, you don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole.
I think also like do it in a way that you like and that you enjoy as well. Like if you're not interested in a certain platform, you don't have to be on that platform. Like I think be on as much as you can, but if there's one that you really like the sort of energy of, like I really like Instagram because I'm a visual person. I like that, and I like maybe designing graphics, or I like that taking photos, that kind of thing. Like that suits me really well, and I have more energy for it, and then it's better, it's more interesting for people. Nobody wants to see me doing a TikTok dance because I'm not interested in doing one. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's okay. I think that's all right. Like to kind of say, if I'm selling myself as an artist and as a person, I'm selling what I want to sell, which is the stuff I like and that matches your music, because it's from the same place.
And I definitely, your point, Matt, about, a gig should be, yes, we're promoters, but it's a hand-in-hand partnership with the bands that you're putting on. I mean, I'm sure we've all probably worked with bands in the past who you're messaging them 2 days before the gig going, are you going to tell anybody that you're playing at our festival?
Oh, that will guarantee to not get a gig again. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're not engaging, and if you're not that you want people, and I really am quite opposed to pay to play. That is not anything I've ever taken part in or felt was right for the industry. People selling tickets to themselves for people to come to their gigs. I don't really agree with that at all. No. But I do agree with taking responsibility for your performance too, so that you're engaging in that, because it's your audience. And you're trying to develop your audience also. So and there's the authenticity that comes from an artist who are promoting their own show. For a promoter, it's great to see that when an artist is really engaging with people.
Yeah, and it absolutely would make that promoter want to work with that artist again.
Yeah, and again, if that's not you, so if you're if you are uncomfortable doing that yourself, it's really hard to sell yourself sometimes. Lots of people just really don't like doing that or feel uncomfortable with that. So work with friends, work with other people in the scene to promote each other as well. I would say that, kind of play to your strengths and support your weaknesses.
So say a band wanted to put on their own show, what should be on their checklist if they're going to organise their own show? What would you say they should have on their checklist? What do they need to do to organise their own show? Who wants to take that question?
Well, the date, I think, is the most important, really. When are you playing? Where are you playing? So if you're going to do your own show, you've got to get your scale of capacity right for a start. What can you sell? What capacity can you play to? Day of the week, a Monday night show is going to be a lot harder to sell than than a weekend, or kind of Tuesday to Sunday. That would be my advice there, really. Yeah, and know your audience. Know what venues they prefer going to. There might be some venues they just don't want to go to.
Yeah.
I think thinking about how we've recently kind of stepped into a little bit of a promoter space with an event that we're going to run, and I think we've had to do a very similar thing, in that we've had to then think about, right, how do we kind of sit on the other side? And I think just initially considering how you engage with the events you go to, and then recreating that. So a big thing that people overlook when they're promoting or starting to promote is ticketing, because if you have a partner through that who already sells a lot of tickets in your area, for example, or sells a lot of tickets to the sort of genre that your act is and things like that, if you're ticketing via their platform, then you instantly have the possibility of connecting with those people whose data that company already has. So looking at using, be it companies like Dice, C-Tickets, things like that have these kind of self-service platforms that allow you to professionally ticket an event, can really help. It's a familiar place. Like, the most important thing that will happen in the eyes of the customer, the person that's buying the ticket for the gig, will be the purchase, will be handing over money. That's the kind of the final threshold you have to get people over, isn't it? Like, that's the biggest commitment they can make in terms of probably, supporting your artist. So obviously they're going to want to do that in a way where they are confident they're giving their money to someone reputable. It's probably a format that they're used to. It's a site they're used to using, all those sorts of things. If they feel like they're being directed to the equivalent of a backstreet alley, to hand over their money for a couple of tickets, that's a barrier that you don't want to be creating. And also, if things aren't set up properly, it just makes it a nightmare on the night when people are like, I bought them online, I haven't got the tickets. If you've got a manifold printout of your ticket buyers, it's just so much easier. And they're the sorts of things that when you're promoting your own gig, you don't want to be worrying about that stuff. You want to be able to know, you don't want to be backstage tuning your guitar and someone sticking their head round going, I've got 3 blokes from down the road who can't get in, what do I do with them? Like, on the gig night, if you want to be able to hand that stuff over to someone else, you want to be able to know it's going to work. So yeah, ticketing has been something that we've really looked into, and tying it in with your social media and things like that, because you're the one that's got that connection online with your fans, and so you want to be in a position where all that you can turn around and you can say, I've got a gig, and you've got people that are engaged in a way that means they're going to react positively to buying tickets. And the ideal is, of course, to sell tickets in advance, because then you know how many people are coming. I mean, ultimately they might all turn up on the door and you have a heart attack until 5 minutes beforehand. But it's, that's the, if you can sell online in advance and things like that, then that all ties in with your overall strategy. So thinking about when you're announcing the gig, you might, like Jayne was talking about scheduling your posts, you might normally do that on a week by week basis. Well, actually, if it's a month to the gig, let's sit down. What does the social media schedule look like? We're going to do a push every Friday for tickets. We're going to put a playlist together that we can talk about that kind of links in with the mailing list and sending the ticket link out. We're going to book good local support, and we're going to give them what they need in terms of artwork and all that sort of stuff. Like, it's a big responsibility. I wouldn't want to be doing it as an artist. It's a big responsibility to promote your own gigs. But yeah, I think you've got to think about all the things that you normally would get and interact with, either as an artist being promoted by someone else or just as a punter buying a ticket, and just try and recreate that in the way that you would expect, so that you give people kind of the confidence and it just looks good. That's what people want, and it gives you the space to be creative with the graphics, with the poster, things like that. If you can put yourself into it as well. I think like Sue was talking about creativity, look at as many avenues as you can for kind of getting the personality of the artist into these things, because that connects with the artist, with the fans.
Brilliant.
I would also add as the same sort of thing, like doing all the creative bits. And I think it can be really, really fun and really rewarding. And I think that fans really can really appreciate a show that's been put on by you, because they're like, I like them and they chose the support. I might not have heard of the support, but I know they'll be good because I like them. And, and even just things like the playlist as people are coming in, like, what the lighting in the room's going to be like? Have you got a sound engineer that you like and trust? Like that sort of stuff, like the things that like, you can get excited about. And I think then the audience can like feel that you're excited about that venue, that like sound, the lighting, the playlist, the support, the graphics. Like, I think that like makes me want to go to a show as a punter. And like, if I'm putting my own show on, that's what I want to like kind of give people. It's just that like excitement and connection.
Uh-huh. It's showing you care, isn't it? You care about these things, and people can really feel that and sense that. People want to know the reason you'll do it. Like, what is the point of this show? I always say with anything, whatever show I'm putting on, what is the point of this show? Why am I doing this? What is this for? And I think with your own show, that you should be very mindful of that. What is the point of this? Am I promoting something? Is it at a certain time? Is it to celebrate something? What is it for? What is the point? Why am I playing there? Why do I care? And then other people will care.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, great. Great tips. Jayne, I was just going to ask this next question. Have you managed to do many bookings yourself, sort of outside of the area? Have you managed to book your own tour? How much can be done by the artists themselves, I think.
So I've never actually worked with a booking agent before. I've booked all my own tours, pretty much. So I've done the first one I did. A lot of those shows I got in the way I was sort of saying earlier, where I was just like, I supported a band based in London. They were like, we'll put you on in London next time you want to. So I sent them an email. Like, we stayed in touch. So I sent them an email, said, I'd love to play a gig in London. And they sorted it out. And it was a really great show. And they sold loads of tickets, even though I didn't really know anyone in London. So I think, having those little like trusted partnerships around the country was a really great start. And then that band actually ended up taking me on tour with them. So that's another way of doing it, is them saying, would you like to support us on our tour? We've got a good like rapport together. And so then I ended up meeting all those promoters through touring with them. And now I have good relationships with a bunch of extra promoters in cities that I'd not, I'd maybe been like blind emailing people in Oxford or something and, never managed anything. Went on tour with them, and now I have a promoter in Oxford I really trust and work with again. So yeah, it's those kind of like building relationships, and also like keeping a spreadsheet like of everyone who's put you on. Like I think it's a really, really good, like, yeah, it takes a while, but once you've got it set up, you just add people in, and then because you're not always going to remember every single gig you play. So if you've got like a list of it, you're like, they put me on. The sound is really good at that venue. I got a good fee. They gave me dinner. They could put me up because they had a spare room, that kind of thing. And remembering those things, and also keeping in the ones that weren't good. So you can be like, that wasn't, they weren't a good promoter fit for me. Like that didn't quite work. And I'll keep that in mind. And I think that's like half the battle, is just like, making sure that you're working with the right people. And then also kind of the planning of the route is like a bit of a faff as well. And what I would say, like, be really careful with that, because I've definitely like done things where I've been like, I can get to London and then Edinburgh the next day, that'll be fine. And then you come to it and you hate yourself. So I'd say being like, I would like to play that show, but actually I'll not play it that date, because if that's the only date they can do in my touring period that I've blocked out this week, if they are like, that's our only day and it's right next to a gig the other side of the country, I'll say, thank you so much for trying. I'll get back in touch next time I'm in the area. It's all right to like miss that one out. And I think that's like something I've learned as well, is just like making sure it makes sense for you.
Yeah, an important lesson, because there's that self-care thing as well, isn't there? If you've just driven hundreds of miles and then you get to a venue and then you've got to set up and actually play a gig and give yourself like performance, which is what you're there for anyway. But if you've just driven for a long way, it's maybe not going to pan out right.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to give your like best at the show if you've sort of done that, and then you'll be kicking yourself later. Also with fees and stuff with tours, it's like, I think it's like I'm a lot more like flexible, because I know I might be like, oh, I've never played in that city before. I understand I might be a hard sell. Like, I'm happy to do a support slot for a band that you think's appropriate, and I'm happy to just take door split, because I've got, and then you might have another show that's in like an Arts Council funded venue and you've just got like a big fee, and it'll kind of like even out across the tour. So I think being really flexible and really like upfront with your position, being like, I can do this. If you give us tea and somewhere to stay, like, I'll be all right. And then you might make a bit more money on another show. So it's about like balancing things, I think. Yeah.
So at what point in a band's career, Matt, would you say that it's like right now it's time that they need to take that step and find a booking agent? And how do they find a booking agent?
It's always, I mean, we get, and any agency get a lot of emails from people that want an agent, and the first kind of myth to bust, I guess, is that, if you think you're ready, then you'll get an agent, and then you'll get gigs, because the agent will get you gigs. But that's obviously not really what happens. Like, it's not just a case of, you've got an agent, therefore you're definitely ready. You can go to a city you've never been to. You can just turn up at a venue, and people will just pour through the door because you've got a booking agent and they know a promoter, and everyone else does all the work for you. Obviously, that's not how it works. So, I think agencies, probably like a lot of professionals now within the industry, get involved with artists fairly early, and a lot of that is based upon belief in the music. You really think that the music is great, or you think there's a lot of potential, and you think it will go on to be something that people really want to see. So some agencies work like that. Like, it's going to be no surprise, there are agents who represent, bubblegum pop, and they're 50-year-old men, like, who go home and listen to Tom Waits. Like, then it's not always a case of that you represent a roster that you live and die by, but you've got to at least be able to appreciate that it's good, and you believe in it as a project. So I think, if you're getting knocked back by a lot of agents when you're approaching them, it could be a case of thinking about, is the music quite up to scratch? And also, am I approaching the right agents and the right, have a look at the artists that you like and that you consider maybe peers or contemporaries or just idols, and you want to aspire to be. Who are they represented by? The sorts of companies that they're represented by. So you're like pitching it in the right direction. But then, in terms of, we do get involved fairly early, but we've got to believe that there's potential. So there's a good chance that you've possibly got a manager on board. We don't work with very many self-managed artists, just because there are certain conversations that you want to be able to have. It's very difficult a lot of the time. I'm sure, Jayne, you seem like the sort of artist that would be able to do this when you're talking about scheduling posts, but you've got to be able to compartmentalise a little bit. You've got to be able to talk about your art separately from the business of it, and you've got to be able to have an honest conversation with someone about the fact that you want to do a gig in Liverpool, but you're not worth any tickets in Liverpool, without taking that personally as an affront to the art that you create. And similarly, you've got to be able to sit down, you've got to be able to budget a whole tour and things like that. And especially financially, you've got to be in a position where you've got to be able to know that it's going to make some money at some stage. I think we've got to believe that. We are, as agents, we're very happy to invest in artists and put, with our time and our effort. Although we don't necessarily put hard cash in the artist's hands, it's not free for us to sit here in our office with our team and work on an artist. That's an investment. So we've got to believe it's going to make some money at some stage as well. And so I think if you're an artist who if you're just doing it for fun and you don't have that kind of slightly business savvy look, then you've got to be looking at working with a manager or something that's going to help bring out that business side of things. So, you know, and obviously when we're talking then about releasing and everything else, you know, having a label partner or a distribution deal, you know, there's going to have to be other people involved at some point that's going to mean it crosses that threshold and gets to the point where it's making money, not just for the artist but also for us. I mean, there might be people watching this that don't know how an agent makes their money. We take 10% of the gross fees, but my view a lot of the time is if you're getting paid £50, 75 quid for a show, you know, my 10% is better off going on petrol to get you home. So, you know, we will not necessarily always charge to start with. So there's going to be a while before we make any money, and it's going to be a long time before we potentially break even. So there's got to be that scale that everyone can see. There's got to be that desire to get it to a point where you're selling 300, 400, 500 tickets as you go around the country, that sort of thing. So things like that you've got to consider. Yeah, I think I can't think if there's anything else off the top of my head, but those are kind of a lot of the key points.
So, I mean, Jayne, you've already talked about, so it is possible to book a tour yourself without a booking agent. It is possible, but you've just got to have that right DIY mindset, be organised and plan ahead. How about festival slots? So, Sue, you work on quite a few large festival events. Would you book with an artist directly, or would you always go through an agent? Or
no. We majority of the time would go through an agent, depending on what scale the artist is. An agent, obviously, if an artist has an agent, we'll always go through the agent, unless we have a very close relationship with that artist as a promoter. And that does happen. And as long as you have a good relationship with the agent as well, and that's quite a mutual thing, then that works well. But we are always approached by artists direct. Again, like Matt says, I would have touched on the point as well, exactly the same about, you know, an artist working with an agent. An agent will always really want to work with an artist as part of a bigger team, you know, to have a kind of manager involved. So it's about thinking of that bigger team as well, really, isn't it? Sometimes we'll get approached by, obviously we get approached by agents a lot of the time to program artists on, certainly at a supporting level, to get emerging artists on bills at the festivals. We will get approached by managers who haven't maybe got a booking agent in place yet, but they're first in the kind of team, and direct by artists. And actually we program across all three kind of different ways, really. Again, going back to how to deal with a promoter, you know, get in touch at the right time. With a festival, you don't want to get in touch too early, because, you know, maybe, you know, if you're getting in touch a year out, say, you know, festival season's just happened and you're getting in touch in September, that promoter is going to be very much concentrating on the headline artists. If you're an up-and-coming artist who wants to open a bill on a stage, well, until we know what that stage is and also what comes with that bill, then we don't really know what slots we've got. Don't leave it too late as well. I would say the optimum time for an emerging artist to want to get on a festival bill, really about 4 months outside of the festival, really 4 to 5 months, to start getting in touch and saying, hi, I don't know, you know, when you don't want to be getting in touch when you've seen full festival announcements, but you want to get in touch when you've seen dates go out there and maybe a headline artist in place. Or, you know, or if it's a festival that you know and a promoter that you know or that you've been to, you can maybe get in touch with a different story where you think you might be, you know, really good on a certain stage they've got. So it's just timing, and again, being friendly, being nice, being, you know, being able to know where would work for who you are as an artist, really. Yeah, what festival, the right festival as well. You know, you're not gonna, as a folk artist, get in touch, you know, with a you know, a black metal festival or a, you know, you've got to know what your festival is, what the stages are, what the audience is, and if that is the kind of thing you would like to go to yourself, then if your audience is at that, then there's possibly a slot for you there.
When somebody we're running out of time, So much to talk about. Well, maybe Sue, if I could make this your top tip for an artist when they reach out to you, if a band if they emailed you, what would you want to see in that email? What kind of links, or would you want them to send you photos or songs? What would you want to see?
Yeah, do you know what? I mean, I'd like to, all that it's good to see emails off people, and you definitely want links in, you want some photos in, you want a bit of chat, a bit of banter in there, you want to feel a bit of personality coming off people. I've read some horrific emails over the years that you just think, you sent that? Really? So just be yourself, be authentic is what I would say, just be yourself. But really, for artists, go and meet people, go out to venues, be part of the scene. If you want to play a venue, go work in the venue, go and get a job there, go and work behind the bar, go and see if you can put posters up, get involved. The more involved you are, the greater connections you'll make. And that's vital. Yeah.
Totally agree with all that. Yeah, when you see there's some bands I've seen, they play 2 gigs a year in the same venue, and they play to their friends, and they never play anywhere else, and they're always like, why can't we get a gig outside of the town? You're like, but they never go and watch any other band play ever.
Oh, that's hugely important. Yeah.
Okay, Jayne, can I come to you then? Top tips. Let's wind up with some top tips for people. So sort of, I guess, regarding getting gigs and things, what are your top tips?
I feel like I've probably said the main stuff, but I would say it's being nice, being consistent, being being yourself, pretty much what we've already said, really, I would say. Just communicating as well as you can, and learn each time you make a mistake. Just learn from it and be like, okay, I should have done that, and then do it differently. Keep learning.
Absolutely. And I think having sort of reliability as well, for an artist to be reliable, they're going to turn up on time, they're not going to forget their guitar or forget their bass player or whatever, all those things are so important to promote.
I would say don't be afraid also to keep contacting people. I know people, nobody wants to be bugged, but at the same time, you do have to continue with things to develop a relationship with somebody. Sending one email to a promoter once and not getting a response, that's pretty standard. I had an email last week from an artist out of the area who got in touch. I put it in my to read bit where I leave it to be read, and I'll come back to that when I want to. Within 5 days, that person had re-emailed me and said, have you read this? And I thought, good for you for chasing me up. So I got back in touch with her, and that was great. And now I've listened to her music, and that it wasn't bothering me. It was just saying, hey, I sent you an email, do you want to have a read of it, in a really friendly, nice way. And that was helpful.
Brilliant. And then Matt, top tips. Any top tips? Refresh me what we've spoken about already, and just to wind up our chat today.
I think, especially going back to kind of conversation about when you want an agent, and I think, and possibly with festivals as well, like the end game is you want people to come to you as an artist, don't you? That's what everyone really wants, is you want to be the person that when they think, right, I'm programming this, especially when we talk about local artists and things like that, which local bands do I want you? And so it's about using a lot of what we've talked about actually with relationships and being nice and building profile to get to the point where people start to come to you. And so that's kind of, especially from an agent's point of view, if 2 or 3 people I trust have told me about an artist, then I will go out and I will search out that artist. I'll have a listen. I might reach out to them and say, hey, are you thinking about touring? What's going on, and things like that. And then you're in so much more a powerful position as an artist, because your people are coming to you. And so, but that's not always going to be the case. You've got to weigh that up with the people that you're going to have to get in touch with. So when you're talking about local venues, local promoters, and just kind of seeing but tying those together is working out how those all link together. And so if you're doing, if you've got a really great artist playing at tracks, for example, who is looking to get out of the area and looking to, you might then mention to me as an agent that you've been in touch with in the past that there's a really great artist in the area, but unless you know that artist is looking for an agent and things like that, so as an artist you've got to be making the most of those relationships. You've got to be telling people you've got plans. You've got to be talking about, have your little elevator pitch almost ready, so that when you're talking to someone, oh yeah, we've got a couple of singles coming out, we're hoping to go on tour, we've got some good things happening. And so then when you play an absolutely blinding set, you're like, oh, this all makes sense, I should tell someone about this. And so you've got to kind of marry the two together. And like, just going back to kind of the idea of what those emails, when you're emailing out to people, look like, there are key phrases that instantly put me off. There is like the long list of genres that kind of just, we're a reggae, metal, jazz influenced beatboxing crew, and you're like, what does that mean? Or the other end, which is we make a music that is completely undefinable. We sound like no other artist you've ever heard, and you're like, I'm pretty sure if I put you into Spotify, it's going to bring up 15, 20 artists that are for fans of, or whatever it is these days, people also like. So just use that. Give me some way of quantifying, contextualising what you're about. Contextualising, we all like to put things in boxes. We like to be able to say, oh, this fits with this fits with that. So you've got to give people a bit of help. We all like to think as artists, if you've ever been in a band or an artist, you like to think you're a unique voice. That's an absolutely valid thing to say, but you've got to look at the way the world works. Like, that's, you sound a bit like Metallica. Say you sound like Metallica. Don't try and fudge it. Pretend you're this brand new thing.
Well, I think we're going to have to wrap up there because we've run out of time. So I think probably the top points there was, be reliable, have clarity in what you're saying and what you're putting out there, and just be nice, be friendly, be nice, play a part in your local music scene. Thank you so much to our wonderful panellists. If this was in real life and had gone ahead, you'd be getting like a rapturous warm round of applause there, wouldn't you? So it's just me clapping in my kitchen all alone. Thank you very much to Matt Hanna from Runway Artist, to Sue Collier from Ionic Events, and to Jayne Dent, who is Me Lost Me. Thanks so much for your time and for taking part in our On Point panel discussion. Thanks everybody for watching, and check out all of the other talks. There's various different panels being going on across the conference, so check it out on the Tees Music Alliance socials, and we'll catch up soon in the local music scene somewhere, I am sure.